the first thing, I had 3 comments about last week. Maybe we'll wait a minute.
Is the door unlocked?
I don't ever unlock it.
Well, it's Cheryl, she doesn't get in.
Maybe. So, there was a question last week that was a good question, and I completely went off on a different track and didn't answer the question. But it was a question about if you, we're supposed to be observing our feelings and observing things and being mindful of everything that happens. But someone mentioned that sometimes when they try to look at their feelings or look at something that's going on in their mind, it disappears. And this is not unusual. I certainly often had the experience of I had something going on. It's like some unskillful, feeling or thought or whatever, and I would think, oh man, that's I really need to look at that guy, and see what's going on with him. But then when you sort of turn your spotlight on it, your attention, if you sit down on the cushion and try to find it, it's just gone. And it's sort of like the mind squares up, nothing like that here. What do you mean? That would be completely inappropriate. I don't ever think things like that, and so the mind will censor things. It's just, and it's a habit, that we get into, and there's all sorts of reasons, right? I mean, of course, trauma can make people censor things in a serious way, but you also might have just grown up in one of those households where there are certain types of feelings that are just forbidden, right? Like a lot of people grow up and they're not allowed to be angry. That is, and they learn very early this is unacceptable, or whatever the emotions might be, and so boys don't cry and all that, and so yeah, you learn to censor it. As soon as it pops up, you're like covering it over, drywall it in, brick it up. It's like, no, that's not here. And so what do you do? Well, it can take a long time to get past your defenses. This is one of those things. And of course the Buddhist tool, the regular Buddhist tools, patience and metta and acceptance and serenity and persistence, those will eventually, I am recording, those will eventually, work through some of those walls, and depending on what it is, you might need to get more creative. You might need to write it down or something, to find some way to draw out the things that you're always hiding within yourself, that you're censoring, that a part of your mind just doesn't accept as appropriate. And you may need to talk it through with someone, right? How many times have we said Buddhism doesn't replace therapy? Well, we need to say it a few more times, probably, before the end. But of course, Buddhism can help. But sometimes you just got to talk through things, and realize that the sky won't fall if you admit, that you have certain thoughts and feelings or whatever they may be. So yeah, the mind thing, they certainly can evaporate when you try to find them. That absolutely happens. But another thing that I realized I missed was we talked about Vedana was last week, I think, and I mentioned that there's positive and negative and neutral. It's very simple. It's just what arises immediately from your experience. And there's also worldly feelings and spiritual feelings, but I didn't explain what that meant. Well, worldly feelings is probably pretty obvious. Those are about experiencing satisfaction and dissatisfaction with worldly things and with craving. And worldly feelings always involve a sense of self. I got this or I didn't get that. This happened, that didn't happen the way I wanted. So worldly feelings are the ones that you're familiar with. But spiritual feelings, those are things that arise from the path, and those are things that aren't mixed up with a sense of self. And the classic examples are, happiness and freedom from regret and all those things that might arise from your practice, your meditation, or whatever. Those are spiritual feelings. The Brahma-viharas can lead to spiritual feelings. That it's not all mixed up with the self and achievement and look at me and all of that. It's things that are more pure. And a negative spiritual feeling, an example of that is the example that's given in the Pali Canon is like distress at realizing the unsatisfactoriness of the world and feeling the urgency to make progress on the path. This is their classic example of a negative spiritual feeling. So now you know, worldly feelings and spiritual feelings. So that I didn't fill in my bracket of 6 things, right? Good, bad, neutral, worldly, and spiritual. Anyway, there was one other thing, a question that you asked. I said that the origin and dissolution factors of the body related to the arising and decay of the body, but the traditional interpretation tends to emphasize the breath because of the communitarial tradition just is obsessed with breath meditation, and they kept trying to turn the foundations of mindfulness into just being about the breath, kind of like our friend Goenka. So he comes by it honestly, I'll tell you. But so it has to do with the start and the ending of the breath, but it also relates to the body itself. That's all in there together. So just so you know what the traditional commentaries tend to talk about. So.
When you say traditional commentary, what exactly does
Yes,
that mean?
there's this, like how the Torah has the Midrash, it has this library full of writings across the centuries of people commenting on the original teachings. Buddhism has the same thing. And a very famous commentary that Theravada Buddhism just sticks to like a barnacle is this book called The Path of Purification, written by Buddhaghosa in 500 AD, which I've mentioned before, that a lot of us, and certainly in the Thai forest tradition, have a little trouble with some of the things Buddhaghosa says. But yeah, so, and it's almost like the commentaries start becoming more important than the original sutras, in various branches of Buddhism, which can be a problem. But it's sort of like, it gets covered over with these centuries of people trying to sort out what it really meant, and as the centuries go by, it can really get kind of off the track sometimes.
Playing the game of gossip every time there's
That's right, because the later commentators are really arguing with the earlier commentators, and it's like, what? Shouldn't we go read the sutras again? What? Wait.
Okay.
And so yes, there is this commentary tradition, which is quite deep. Right, so this week we were going to talk about the mind, which the word in the sutras there is the chitta. I think I mentioned that a while back. You can translate it as mind or heart. There's not a good translation for chitta at all, and we'll talk about why that is. So, the third foundation of mindfulness, the chitta. The chitta is not a part of our mind. Oh, hello, Anna. It's not a part of our mind that we have a lot of direct contact with. The chitta, I've talked about this before, that there's this part of the mind that doesn't use words, right? It's silent from our point of view. It's not related to the feelings that are always arising. It's not Vedana. It's this underlying sort of mood of the mind, or moods arise from it. It's the sort of place that impulses and intuitions arise from, the chitta. And so the idea is that if you turn away from all the specific things in your mind, all these sensations and feelings and thoughts, the sights and sounds of the senses, the feelings and thoughts, the ideas, you turn away from all that to sort of the empty space, or just the pure awareness that sort of surrounds all these objects, or that's the way people think of it, that empty silence has this particular feeling to it. That's the chitta, and it might feel calm or agitated or restless and grasping or irritable and rejecting, but it's not thoughts or concepts. It's a mood. It's not even a specific feeling. It's just it causes the thoughts and feelings arise from the chitta because of the state it's in. And so it has a lot of effect on your mind. It might feel dull. It might feel very sharp and aware. And so how does the sutta talk about this, the sutra, if we want to be Sanskrit about it? And so in its sing-songy way, it goes on, and how amongst does a monk live contemplating consciousness in consciousness? And that word consciousness is chitta in the Pali. He says, herein monks, a monk knows the consciousness with craving as with craving, the consciousness without craving as without craving. And it goes on like that, and it lists several pairs. So what is he talks about? He talks about craving and without craving. I think that's pretty straightforward. You know, your mind is either has a sense that it's looking for something, it wants something, it's easily attaches to things, right? This is sort of a mood of the chitta. It's not any particular one thing that you're attached to, it's the need to attach, you know, when it's like, I gotta find something to occupy myself with or whatever it is, you know. This is a graspy, you know, sort of restless state of chitta. And then it'll find some specific thing to obsess over, you know. And now you have a particular thought with a particular Vedana. But originally, it was just this sense of neediness, with unfocused, no particular object in mind. That would be like the chitta of craving. And then without craving, you know, you're calm, you're placid, you're not feeling pulled in any particular direction. Things aren't sparking your mind. It's like, ooh, you know, I need to get a hold of that or think about that or whatever. You know, you're able to just kind of rest. You're without craving. You don't have a craving chitta. And the next pair is hateful and without hate. And so this is not any particular thing that you're hating. It's just, you know, when you're just, there's a lot of Southernisms for this, you know. You know, you're sort of hair triggered in the pissed off position, you know, and anything. Sorry, I shouldn't. I mean, we are in Arkansas. It's how everybody talks. I promise. Yeah, and it's like you're not mad about anything in particular, but nobody better cross you, you know, because your chitta is set on ill will, you know, and it won't take much to push you over the edge. Or you're without that, you know, and it's like somebody comes in, blah, 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 and you're like, what's your problem? You know, you're not reactive, you know, you have a chitta without hate, without ill will. And the next pair, ignorant and without ignorance, you know, ignorance is always an interesting one to try to interpret. It can mean any number of things. I mean, I like a traditional Buddhist interpretation of ignorance that I like. If you just say, well, what do you mean by ignorance? Well, one thing is an ignorant person thinks that helpful things are harmful, and they think that harmful things are actually good for them. And so they tend to attach themselves very unskillfully to the wrong things, you know, and so a mind of ignorance is gullible, you know. You're willing to take any half-cocked idea that comes up or whatever. It's like, you know, somebody comes in with the latest conspiracy theory, and you know what, that sounds right. I think that's what is going on, or whatever it may be, you know. So you're easily pulled into sort of delusions and these imaginary, you know, ideas that don't necessarily relate to reality, or that things that you should know are wholesome and good, you don't trust them. You're looking for something tricky, you know. It's a mind that thinks it's got to find to work the situation, right? You got to sort of find a way around the normal way, the way chumps do things. We got to find the smart way, the tricky way, you know. We got to see what's really going on. So that kind of thing. You can think of it in a lot of ways. But yeah, so ignorance and without ignorance. So this is the chitta we're talking about. Or prone to ignorant thinking, you know. You know what? Getting drunk before final exams, this sounds like a great idea. I'll be so calm, you know. So you're just easily drawn into terrible ideas. Unless that works for you, I suppose. So the next one, there's not a pair, but it's just shrunken. The shrunken state of mind. And so this is kind of relates to sloth and torpor, favorite hindrance. You know, kind of dull and lazy, and also a certain rigidity is associated with this idea of the shrunken mind. You know how when you just had it with everything and you're just kind of tired, and somebody says, hey, you need to look at this new thing. I think we need to do things a different way. And you're like, no, get away. I don't want to think about that. You know, you're unresponsive, unable to take on, you know, any new information that's going on, you know. And so that's also related to this idea of shrunken chitta. So a chitta that's just wants to lay down and fall asleep and doesn't want you to tell it anything Don't give me no bad news, right? This is the shrunken state. And the last one that it mentions is, in this first state anyway, is distracted. We've all been in a mind that's easily distracted, right? You're just waiting for the next interruption to completely abandon whatever it is you're supposed to be doing. You're ready to be distracted. So that's one set of characteristics of the citta, and the next set kind of refers more to meditation states. The first one of these is you can be a mind that's developed or undeveloped. So either your mind, is easily drops into calm meditative states, or it's just your plain old worldly mind that's just getting pushed and pulled and can't land anywhere. So your mind can be developed or undeveloped. And a very similar one, I'm not sure why it's a separate category, but it is, but the mind that knows there are higher states, like you're just, you're not being very mindful, you're not really being very aware or very Buddhist. You're just in a sensual state of mind, sensual in the sense of you're attuned to the world and worldly things, and not your Buddhist practice. Or the mind that it knows that it is in the highest state, and so this is referring to a very pure state of meditation. Traditionally, that's how the commentaries talk about this. Knowing you're in a state where there's none higher, at least none higher for you, right? Your mind is clear and pure and mindful, and you got it going on, man. You're doing the thing.
What is the sort of the title, the name of that? The first one was developed versus undeveloped.
Right. This one, it's the mind that knows there are higher states, and the mind that knows it is in the highest state.
Okay.
And it kind of relates to developed and undeveloped. I cannot explain why it has its own category, but it does. So the next one is more straightforward: concentrated and unconcentrated, which is samadhi or not samadhi. And samadhi is this gathering the mind into a calm, sort of focused, one-pointed place where you're. It's a deep state of meditation. That's what samadhi is about. Shamatha, calm abiding, is kind of the beginning of that, and then as your mind becomes more and more gathered, it can be a deep state of samadhi. So concentrated and unconcentrated. And the last one, the last pair, is free and not free. And the commentary traditionally associates this with the hindrances. So when you're in the state of calm samadhi meditation, you are actually free of the hindrances temporarily, so that restlessness and worry, sloth and torpor, doubt, ill will, greed, they are not affecting you. Your mind is very calm and pure and wholesome. There's a very wholesome sense to this state of mind. And so you can be aware that the citta is in this state. So. Any questions?
So this question might not make any sense.
It's okay. Sometimes what I say makes no sense either, so that's okay.
So from the reading, I had this idea that the citta was a part of the mind or a thing.
Right.
But it made a lot more sense to me. So this is a case where what you said made a lot of sense to me. It seemed more like a condition or a state or a characterization.
One way you might think of the citta, and the way the Pali Canon thinks of the citta, and even the Abhidharma agrees with us on this, is that citta is a process. Citta is something that's always happening in the mind, and so it has these particular states and can give rise to these various states of mind, because it is changing all the time. It's a process like everything else. But yes, and it is subtle.
Thanks.
So have some more. And so that's all the different types of citta, it's examples of the way your this subtle part of the mind might be. And then in the next part, he kind of gives the familiar boilerplate. Thus he lives contemplating consciousness or citta internally or externally, or both, origination factors. So he goes through some more of these pairs. So you can this is how you can contemplate the chitta as internally, which traditionally means your state of mind versus someone else's state of mind, which is a little hard to see. But you know, you can think it's just a more looking at it more objectively. In a typical person, in someone besides me, you know, what are these states of mind like? You know, or you know, like I always like to do is you can look at your own sort of mood of the mind as if it were someone else's, you know, and try to separate your sense of ownership from this state of mind. You know, it's like, oh, just like any other Joe Schmo, my mind is very shrunken right now, and I don't want to think about anything, you know. This is very typical. All human beings are in this state at one time or another, you know. So internally and externally, or both. Contemplate the origination factors or the dissolution factors. You know, as you go throughout your day, you see these moods sort of arising and falling. You start out in the morning, you had your coffee, you're feeling pretty good and sanguine, which is one of my favorite ancient words. You know, and then you know, you get to work and then things start getting frustrated and out of hand, you know, and then you get to lunch and you get something to eat and you know, now you're calming down and, you know, and your chitta is going through these various phases throughout the day. They're coming and going, all these different moods, you know. You're easily distracted, or it's easy for you to concentrate, or it's easy for you to get all upset, or you can just in a mood where you can just take anything. Now's the time to come give me the bad news, right? You know, I can take it. So these moods arise and fall and change all the time. Chitta is a process. Or you just sit in sort of the bare attention mode with this notion that consciousness exists. So just that I have this chitta, it's in a certain state, and I'm just focused on that. I'm just kind of holding my awareness, you know, without trying to, you know, think about it in any fancy way. I just know it exists, and so he lives detached and clings to nothing. It's sort of as all of these sections wrap up, you know, it's like for the advanced meditator who sits, clings to nothing. You know, you can see all of these subtle states of mind. So yeah, the chitta is subtle. It's not a part of the mind that we have direct control over. Craving and hatred and delusion are states of mind that arise from the chitta and they sort of envelop the mind like mist, right? Chitta can also affect the quality of mind, whether if it's feeble and distracted or restless or alert and concentrated. And the one way to understand the chitta is in the Dhammapada. Chapter 3 is called the mind, but that word mind is chitta. You know, that like in the sutras they'll translate it as consciousness, and then in the Dhammapada they'll translate it as mind. And this is why it's good to know a few Pali words so that you can tell what it is you're reading about, because we're at the mercy of the translators. But if you read chapter 3, it talks about the chitta. That's what the whole chapter is about, and I'll just read it to you because it's not very long. Just as a fletcher straightens an arrow shaft, even so the discerning man straightens his mind, his chitta, so fickle and unsteady, so difficult to guard, right? It gets away from you easily. As a fish, when pulled out of water and cast on land, throbs and quivers, even so is this mind agitated. Hence should one abandon the realm of Mara, right? Mara, the great distractor, is trying to pull you off the path. Wonderful indeed it is to subdue the mind, the chitta, so difficult to subdue, ever swift and seizing whatever it desires. A tamed mind brings happiness. Let the discerning man guard the mind, right? Keep an eye on this mood. It's going to get you into trouble. So difficult to detect and extremely subtle, seizing whatever it desires. A guarded mind brings happiness. Dwelling in the cave of the heart, the mind without form wanders far and alone. This is a very mystical passage, and we've been arguing for 2,500 years about exactly what this means, but this is what chapter 3 says. The mind wanders far and alone. Those who subdue this mind are liberated from the bonds of Mara, from the bonds of worldly distraction. That's a little more understandable. But yes, dwelling in the cave of the heart without form, consider that. What might that mean? All right. next one. Wisdom never becomes perfect in one whose mind is not steadfast, so it takes constant effort. Who knows not the good teaching and whose faith wavers. So, your unsurety, can gets in the way of figuring out this very subtle aspect of the mind. Unsurety? That's not a word. All right. There is no fear for an awakened one, whose mind is not sodden by lust, it's a good Elizabethan word, nor afflicted by hate, that is, and who has gone beyond both merit and demerit. So this obsession of the self, right, with being good or bad or whatever, that's the merit and demerit it's talking. It doesn't mean don't be good. No, we want you to be good, but don't have it all mixed up with your sense of self. That always poisons it. It tends to poison your virtue when you're just trying to be good because you want a gold star or whatever, or you don't want a gold star. You want to hurt the kids with the gold stars, if you were one of those. All right, I'm sorry, I'm off the track. Where are we now? Realizing that this body is as fragile as a clay pot, and fortifying this mind like a well-fortified city. It's an unusual metaphor for Buddhism. Fortify the mind like a fortified city. But it wants you to understand how important it is to pay attention to this. Fight out Mara with the sword of wisdom. Sort of a Manjushri reference from the Mahayanaists. Then, guarding the conquest, remain unattached. So this well-fortified mind, which really just means a mind that's well guarded with mindfulness, right? So that your chitta is not slipping out from under you and going and, drinking it all night at the bar or whatever your chitta might do, metaphorically speaking. We guard the mind. The mind is this fortified city. This is our stronghold. Be your own refuge, as the Buddha says. I think sort of relates to this notion. Ere long, alas, this body will lie upon the earth, unheeded and lifeless, like a useless log. So, the happy part of the sutra. We will be dead eventually. So, work on this while you can, is the implication there. Whatever harm an enemy may do to an enemy, or a hater to a hater, an ill-directed mind inflicts on oneself a greater harm. So your own mind will hurt you worse than any enemy.
You're your own worst enemy.
That's exactly what it's saying. And neither mother nor father nor any other relative, this is back in the days when that was your Social Security, right? No one can do greater good for you than a well-directed mind. That is your greatest ally. So, that's chapter 3, the Chitta. Now you know.
Oh, chapter 3 of what?
Chapter 3 of the Dhammapada. It's the one that starts out, what's the first line? All our experiences follow from our mental state. It's often said much more poetically than that, but that's chapter 1.
And the Dhammapada, that's that book, this little book.
It is, that's right. So you can go read chapter 3.
Free copies out there.
Right?
Yeah.
So grab one. Give one to your mom, or whatever. All right, so any questions or thoughts about the Chitta before we talk about our last topic?
Well, you're helping me understand why when I grabbed one of those little books one time, and it just totally went over my head. Where do I start learning this foreign language?
Right.
Or at least giving me some vocabulary.
Right. You can also pick up Anna's little sheet in there that is actually talks about the first chapter. The Compassion Works for All sheet that's on that desk with the Dhammapadas, it actually talks about chapter 1 of the Dhammapada. So now you know. There was no way for you to know that. I just thought of it, in fact.
But it's on the same table.
Right. So there's chapter 1. And if you subscribe to our newsletter, I guess you can get the other ones too. She's walking through the Dhammapada in order, in this set of newsletters. So.
That's why there's a million commentaries.
Right. Anna's making her own commentary, and a very fine commentary it is.
Yeah,
So.
because people have been saying, now what exactly is that word? Parsing it all out.
Right. What are you talking about?
It's good, it's meaty stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, it's easier to access the Dhammapada, but it's still part of the Pali Canon, and it's still a bit of a climb to really get into the subtleties of what he's talking about. I mean, a lot of it's pretty straightforward, some of it not so much. All right, so the third foundation of mindfulness, things that are useful to contemplate when you're doing your mindfulness, meditation and exercises. The body, the feelings, the simple feelings, the Vedana, and now the mind, this layer of the mind that everything arises from. And the fourth foundation of mindfulness, this is the one that I said it's always translated as like mental phenomena, but the word they are translating is Dhamma, And so when you say, well, the Dhamma, that's the teachings, right? And it's like, yes, the fourth foundation of mindfulness is to mindfully contemplate the teachings, basically. And how do they relate to you in your current state of mind? That would be an obvious place to start. So yeah, the first three foundations are very experiential, right? The body, the feelings, this mental mood, and they don't really involve conceptual thinking. But the last foundation about the Dharma starts pulling in some conceptual ideas. And the way I think of it, this is just Doug's Dharma, is that the first three are sort of preparation to me. And this is why every time I sit down to meditate, I'll walk through the four foundations of mindfulness, like tune into the body, and then what are all the sensations and feelings and, feeling tones that are, come off the way my day's gone thus far, and then the mind. Then you're getting more and more subtle, right? The body, and then the feelings, and then this mood of the mind. You have to be very quiet and sort of listen, to read these things. But that sort of takes you down to where it's like, okay, maybe I'm ready to think about Buddhism now. Maybe I'll get something out of it, And the fourth foundation has to do with some of the teachings. Right, and so the Dharma can mean just the way things naturally are, and it also refers to the teachings, because, of course, from Buddhism's point of view, the teachings explain the way things are. Right? So what does the sutra tell us about the Dhamma, the mental phenomena we need to look at? And it begins with the five hindrances. And of course we remember what the five hindrances are: greed, ill will, restlessness and worry. I have them written down so that I won't forget them. Dullness and drowsiness, and then doubt about the path, right? You look and to see if any of those things are present in your mind, or if they are absent in your mind. It's like, no, I'm not restless at all. I'm just really calm today. I don't have that hindrance, or I'm falling asleep, sloth and torpor is just taking me over. Be aware of what hindrances are in your mind. It's like, I just really want to make this thing work right. I'm full of grasping, or, I just don't want to be around this person. I'm just, everything sets me off, full of ill will. Note what hindrances are in your mind. This is one of the things you can contemplate with the fourth foundation of mindfulness. What do these things feel like in your mind? This is very experiential. Everything about Buddhism. They want you to, don't just contemplate it philosophically. It's like when you're mad, what does that really feel like? What's your body doing? What's your chitta doing? What's your Vedana doing? What thoughts are you having? What's going on with you? How does it work with you when you have these hindrances?
I'm sorry.
That's all good.
A hindrance. Mark.
And so the next thing it talks about are the five aggregates, which I think Cheryl is going to talk about, and so I'm not going to talk about. But these are just five things that we think we are. We believe that we are our body, right? We believe that we are our Vedana. We talked about Vedana. That's one of the things that you identify with. It's like, ooh, I'm really displeased. That seems like us very strongly. So we identify with it. Blah, blah, blah. The next one is perceptions, which is a weird one. It's this tendency of the mind to stick a label or a concept on everything that happens, right? Somebody walks in and immediately they get a name and all their back history comes back and you're like, oh, that guy, That's perception doing that for you, sana. The next is sankharas, which is sort of the complex mental structures that our experiences form in our mind. So they're a result of our experiences, and they also direct how we react and our intentions and our judgments. They all come out of the same cause. So lots going on there. And the last one is your sense consciousness. The sense consciousness is the part of the mind that pulls all of this together. It brings all the sights and sounds and ideas and histories and ancient resentments, and it brings them all together, and it makes this movie that we are the star of. All day long we're walking around in this movie that the vijnana, the sense consciousness, is putting on for us, and we believe in it. We absolutely believe that this movie that our mind is playing for us is us.
Now, these are the 5 aggregates?
These are the 5 aggregates, and we'll talk lots more about the 5 aggregates. But yeah, so these are things you can contemplate. But we'll move on. The next thing is the 7 factors of enlightenment. Are any of those present? Am I mindful? Do I have discernment? Was that a word? Do I have energy or not? Are any, what's present, what's absent? Am I feeling some joy, some glee, or am I feeling its opposite? Am I feeling equanimity, or is that just out the window? Equanimity and the wise owl owl, they're both just gone, So what factors of enlightenment are present within me now or not? This is something to be mindful of. And then the last one is the Four Noble Truths. And of course, the key thing about the Four Noble Truths when you're just looking at your state of mind is, what am I suffering from? What's getting me right now? And what am I craving? What am I demanding? And any Buddhism suggests that any suffering or dissatisfaction or disease that you are feeling, if it's mental, obviously you can have a sore back. There's a lot of mental components to that too, But any disease or stress that you are feeling, there's something that you are craving. There's something you're trying to hold on to or get or push away or make happen that's feeding that dis-ease, right? This is what the Four Noble Truths are telling you about your current state of mind. And that if you can let go of that craving, that demand, then your disease will lessen. So yeah, the 4th foundation of mindfulness. That's where the all the Buddhism that we learn about lives. And it's interesting. In the Chinese version of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, there's actually only a couple of things that are in this last one, and I think it's interesting. It's the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of enlightenment. The Chinese version leaves out the more conceptual ones, like the aggregates or the Four Noble Truths. And to me, there's something to that, because how the first 3 foundations of mindfulness, there's no words associated with what it feels like to be the body, or what it feels like when these positive and negative and neutral feelings arise. You're just observing them, or the mood of the mind. There's nothing you can just feel it. You can just observe it directly. You don't have to say anything about it. And the hindrances and the 7 factors of enlightenment are the same. They are states of mind that require no commentary or logical thinking. You can just notice when they're there. And so to me, the hindrances and the enlightenment factors are the heart of this mindful Dhamma. But that's just me. I think I'm the only person. Well, I know this because one guy was talking about it, and it's like, isn't this the important part? And I was like, yes, I think you're right. But it never hurts to think about how suffering arises from craving. That's always the right answer in Buddhism. So I don't mind some of these other things being in there, but yeah, the whole thing about mindfulness is it's not a game of logic and analysis and all of that. What's really going on with you this second? All the way from the bottom, my left big toe feels kind of cold, all the way to the most subtle, I'm just in an itchy, irritable frame of mind, I have this mood, that usually you only notice them when the irritation comes out, right? But if you're mindful, you can see it, they're waiting, and you can guard against it. So that when somebody comes in, you don't just, you don't just lose it, right? You knew you were irritable, And so you can, yes, I know what you're saying, but let's talk about that later, or whatever, that you don't just react because you know what state your chitta is in. So yes. Any thoughts?
My thought, I'm just reeling here because you're making it fit into my logical left brain scaffold that I have up here that I need to understand things. Because all the descriptions and practice of leading through mindfulness is pretty straightforward, pretty basic. Because I'm just a beginner.
Right.
And I can almost get that. And then I hear about contemplation and all this other stuff. I'm going, what are y'all talking about?
Right.
You're helping me, this is what
Right.
you're talking about. This puts it in a little bit more structure.
It's like any professional field, it develops this set of vocabulary that makes it impenetrable, right?
That's what it is felt like.
But vocabulary is important because you need to use the right word. This is why, right, because, science uses Latin and math because those don't change. Those don't shift based on your everyday experience. No, you have to be taught what the scientific terms mean, and then that's what they will mean for the rest of your life. And Buddhism's the same way. We have these technical terms, and there's no way for you to know what they mean. We don't really want you to know we don't want you to just guess. No, you have to learn, right? But then once you understand, now you know this is what Vedana is. It's not just my feelings, it's this very specific thing that's instant, in the moment, that arises from every sensation and experience you have. Now you know, this is what you're being mindful of, not, your tangle of jumble thoughts about your Uncle Fred or whatever, that's not Vedana. No, that's something much more complicated and hard to untangle. No, this is very easy. When I think of Uncle Fred's face, or whatever, I just have this reaction with no concept to it, right? It's just, it's either pleasant or unpleasant, or I don't care about Uncle Fred. It's like, So that's all Vedana is, and that's what we want to be aware of in our mindfulness. Not try to untangle our Byzantine, emotional states. That's later. You will have to untangle those eventually. But a few things I want to say here, because Cheryl will be here in the sub-teacher seat next week. And so I want to leave you with some quotes and a few thoughts. So the Tao Te Ching, not to switch religions on us or anything, but it has this phrase which I think is so important for a lot of things. Know the white, but keep the black. Right? That's one of those mysterious things in the Tao Te Ching. And to me, it's important. The way I think about that is, what's the white? The white is what you can see. The white is what's clear and well delineated. Like I got this whole library full of teachings. That's the white, right? It's important to understand the teachings and practice the teachings, but don't cling to the teachings, because the teachings ultimately are not what's going to save you. What you want to hold close, is more like the feeling of a still mind, right? And a pure and tender heart. To me, that's the black. It doesn't take any fancy words or concepts, but it's the heart, And there are people who criticize the way Buddhism is practiced today, that it's just so busy, Hillside Hermitage is what I'm talking about. Anyway, it's this whole thing, and they're like, they don't even think people should meditate. It's like, this is all too busy. You're just distracting yourself. And it is true that you can grasp Buddhism wrongly, right? And use it as an anesthesia instead of as a tool, right? If that's what. I lost my place. No momento, por favor. Right, so if you use Buddhism to keep your mind off your real problems, then yes, you're just using it to stay busy, and you grasped it incorrectly. Because just thinking that you can mechanically do the practices and like improve your spiritual development or make spiritual progress, that's one of the 10 fetters. That's clinging to rites and rituals. That means that thinking that you can do some automatic thing that it will just, inch you towards enlightenment without you having to ever really understand yourself or do the real work, right? That there's some technique you can use. And a lot of people treat Buddhist practices that way, so you can hold it incorrectly. Right, the 10 fetters, right, what are those? Clinging to self-view, that's the first one. Doubt about the path is the second one. The third one is this clinging to rituals, thinking there's some trick to it. Anyway, and there's 7 more. So the idea is not to always stay busy and be doing something. It's not what it's about. So here, an example of a practice that leads towards stillness. This is a fun meditation, if you think meditation's fun. So you sit down and you ask yourself the question, what am I? And then you wait for an answer. You silently sit as still as you can, waiting for an answer, right? And of course, your mind may start generating answers because it can't stand stillness or silence, but so then you back up and you do it again. What am I? And you just sit. We're back to the cat watching the mouse hole, right? You're awake, you're aware, you're alert, you're silent because you're listening. But of course, no one's speaking. But that attitude of quiet, still listening, this is the heart of mindfulness meditation. You want to be able to be as still and silent and receptive as you can be. What am I? Anyway, so something to try when you're bored. All the techniques of Buddhism, they're to tame the mind, to learn to think and feel and see the world as a Buddhist. That right, this is the white, the teachings, all the clear stuff. And they're things to try out, right? The idea is to be curious with these things. This is not some, beat you with the ruler until you stop complaining. These are all things to help you understand the mind, to spark your creativity, to deepen your understanding. All of these different practices that you can try. But the point of them all, of course, is to help you let go, to peel yourself off of what you think you are. They're to help you be more simple. We're very complicated, but in Buddhist practice, we want to get more and more simple, as complicated as Buddhism sounds. That is the goal. Buddhism wants your mind to be free of clinging, as spacious as the trackless sky, your feet planted on the ground, fully awake and aware in the present moment, your heart full of love and compassion and peace, right? So one of my favorite Dhammapada verses, 95, yielding like the earth, clear and joyous as the lake, as still as a stone pillar set deep in the ground. This is the black, this is where we want to live. So, I have 3 Ajahn Chah quotes for you. The first one, use virtue to make your life simple and pure. With virtue as a basis for everything you do, your mind will become clean, kind and clear and quiet. Meditation will grow easily in this soil. Second quote, try to be mindful and let things take their natural course. Then your mind will become still in any surroundings like a clear forest pool. All kinds of wonderful, rare animals will come to drink at the pool, and you will clearly see the nature of all things. You will see many strange and wonderful things come and go, but you will be still. This is the happiness of the Buddha. Third quote, the heart of the path is so simple. No need for long explanations. You'll have to forgive me for my teaching. Give up clinging to love and hate. Just rest with the way things are. That is all I do in my own practice. Do not try to become anything. Do not make yourself into anything. Do not be a meditator, right? Do not become enlightened. When you sit, let it be. When you walk, let it be. Grasp at nothing. Resist nothing. Of course, there are dozens of meditation techniques to develop samadhi and many kinds of vipassana, right? We're talking about that. But it all comes back to this. Just let it all be. Step over here where it's cool, out of the battle. Why not give it a try? Do you dare? So, Ajahn Chah has this wonderful way of teaching right from the heart. So how are we feeling?
That was helpful.
I was trying to, a little deprogramming after our deep dive into Buddhist minutiae.
You probably said it more than once, but it finally made sense to me today that these taxonomies aren't just, there's a bit of a flow chart hidden in the taxonomies.
Right, absolutely.
And that's, like I said, it's probably been obvious this whole time, but
No,
it makes
no,
sense
it's
now.
not. It's
But it
not.
makes sense now. I finally
Right.
heard it.
Right. All the teachings tie together one way or the other. They're like this big net. You can start at any point and work your way through the lists, right, to all the other lists. They're all in there somewhere, right?
I definitely have to hear it a dozen times before
Oh, yeah.
it goes from
Right.
nothingness to obvious, but somewhere.
Right, because it's a different way of thinking, you know. The Buddhism is against the grain.
Yeah.
It's a different way of thinking about the world. And
Just saying the word flowchart. See, I never thought about it. That word, those two words right there. Oh,
Right.
it isn't linear,
It's quite circular, actually.
but not just circular.
Right.
No, you're sort of,
Right.
you're spiraling, right? This is the thing. You start with the obvious stuff, improve your behavior and observe the body and all of that. And then it gets more and more subtle as you go, you know, until you're just down there between your thoughts, listening, you know. It's a grand and glorious adventure.
That's great,
It is.
Well, thank you.
that was great, thank you, yeah.
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 Yeah. I'm glad it's only an hour. My mind is on. I gotta have M&Ms now.
Right?
I'm laughing because I feel the same way. And
Yeah.
that was an uncomfortable laughter.
If y'all aren't feeling just as screwy as I am, then you're not listening.
But that's the thing, right? I mean, this is just the toe in the water. You know, you can. What I mean by that is I mean, I convey a lot of Dhamma, you know, but it's like what we've covered through, you know, this is 7 of the anyway. We didn't quite make it, but that's okay. We will. You know, what we talked about of the Eightfold Path. I've told you everything that I consider important. You know, everything that makes this all make sense to me, you have now heard. But hearing is just the first part. You know, now you have to sit with it. You have to consider it. You have to go maybe find reference books that explain it better than I do, you know, and make it your own. You know, this is the big part of the work is first you hear and you memorize and then you contemplate and it starts seeping in like barbecue sauce, you know.
I
All
had
the
an
way through.
interesting, the description you gave last week or the week before about being the scientist, just the observer.
Right.
And I did a meditation this week and I was just for fun. I thought, okay, I'm gonna be the observer. I'm the nerd and I have a white coat and a
Right.
clipboard.
That's right.
And I'm just gonna observe breathing,
Right.
itching,
That's
you
right.
know. It didn't take long that the observer became just the bored nerd.
Right.
I'm breathing, sinking, itching, vibrating, and it just, I felt more grounded than because I've struggled with my meditation.
Right.
But just having that little image of the white coat, the card, and the
That's
chart,
right.
it's like, that was all my only job was,
That's right. You're not involved,
Boxes,
you're just
I'm not-
observing.
it's not my job, I'm not the primary investigator, I'm just
Right.
the
Just a
nerd.
data analyst,
Yeah,
technician.
not even analyst, just a collector.
Just a
Check the
the
box.
field technician, you know, it's like
It's
we're
very
receiving the
helpful. I just
signals.
wanted to tell you that, that was my experiment.
Very good.
That's amazing.
Well, the other thing about scientists is that they have to be curious and open to whatever's coming. You're not gonna learn anything if you're sitting there going good or bad, or
Right.
true or false, or whatever.
Right.
You have to just be looking at what is, and to me, the essence of what you're talking about is Buddhism makes you curious
Right.
in a really different way about how you are, how the world is, how you're interacting with the world. And that by itself is just, if nothing else comes out of it, if you can just spend the rest of your life with that
Right.
curiosity.
Right.
Gathering data.
That there's all sorts of things going on with you that you weren't really paying attention to. So when you pay attention to them, things start becoming clear. Well, first they get really confusing, and then they start becoming clearer, you know. When you become friends with all of this, right? It's like, oh, there's that same old thought pattern. It's the one that, you know,
Right.
I spent 5 years fretting about it, you know, and it keeps coming back, you know. And you're just so familiar with it, it's like an old friend. It's like your old shoe, you know, with the rock in it, you know. It's like, yes, this is so familiar. But you know, you get familiar with your mind.
Well,
Make friends with it.
There's all these characteristics that seem, they just never occurred to me that could be. I mean, you know,
That's right.
it's like trying to explain color theory to someone who's colorblind. I mean, and I'm the one who's colorblind, and it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. But then after 3 or 4 weeks, it's like, I kind of see what you're talking about.
Yeah, because it's teaching you vocabulary. I mean, in this one,
Yes.
you know, there was a lot of vocabulary in the Foundations of Mindfulness and all that stuff, you know. So,
Yeah, that was a good analogy, but every profession has their vernacular.
That's
For the
right.
first 4 years, it's just learning a language.
That's right. How to talk so your patients will have no idea what you're saying. This is the key, you know. But the other doctors will know exactly what you're
And
saying.
it'll stay the same across the ages. That doesn't change.
Right.
It's the same.
Right. That's why a lot of teachers will sprinkle in these Buddhist words, because when you say Vedana, when you say Chitta, when you say Dhamma, you know, it's very specific. When you you know, say sense perceptions or whatever, sticking labels on things, you know, this is a very specific function of the mind, and there's no English word for any of these things, you know. So, well.
Thanks, Doug.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I guess we'll stop.
So
It's
let me
almost
just ask
time.
you to read for next week
Yes.
the development of ego, chapter 5.
Chapter 5,
We're gonna
okay.
have fun.
Back in the book.
Back to the book.
Right. Where it's the Mahayana take on the 5 aggregates, right? That's a lot of what he's
Yes,
talking
that's right. It's a
about.
Mahayana teacher, a Tibetan teacher, talking about Theravada, or the basic foundational teaching. So it's different flavor
Right.
than
A,
here,
a-
but it's still the same material.
a bit more poetic. I mean, it's very groovy. I really like
Mhm.
the picture they paint. So, all right, good people online, thank you so much.